Whether it's a La Nina or an El Nino pattern doesn't really matter. It's a cycle, right? You already know El Nino, cool water, warm water, but just bring it up. 400-year grand solar minimum, high electric charge, low electric charge, high electric charge, low electric charge. And you'll start to see, doesn't matter what the cycle duration is, it's a cycle that can be mapped out with pretty good precision now. And you know their effects and consequences because it's happened many, many times before. Now pluck those errors out of history, and then you'll get a good blueprint of what's coming up the next few years. Keto has been a hot topic for years now. Myself and thousands of others have personally experienced health benefits of keto. I'm not on the keto diet, quote unquote. I use this amazing keto powder. I mix it in with my coffee in the mornings to start to give me that energy boost. AdaptWithKeto.com. Powered form of the most ketogenic MCT oil called C8. It helps give me the benefits of elevated ketones without having to follow the keto diet. I had more energy and just seemed to take on the day, and also my mental focus because I like the nootropics. It adds in that extra layer of concentration. And if you want to begin experiencing these benefits yourself, results that you can see this Black Friday, go to adaptwithketo.com or click on the link in the description box below to get 51% off your order today. And now on with the video.
Hello and welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight we have special guest David DuByne from Adapt 2030. He discusses energetic changes on Earth as the sun repeats its 400-year cycle of low activity, affecting global crop production and the economy and everyone on our planet, with a timeline for what you can expect from now to 2023 as society resets. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, thanks for the kind intro. And I think it's more of a once in a 2,000-year cycle this time. Now, the only other times you can find this in history in the last 2,000 years, 79 AD and 1486, are the only two times in the last 2,000 years that this configuration of the planets being so close, their maximum closeness that they can ever be together in a single quadrant as a tiny little square forming a second magnetic field that will loop onto our Earth. Because you got to realize it's only Mars and then Jupiter, so we're 2 planets away from the second magnetic field forming. And you know, we're 3 planets away from the sun. Now, the second magnetic field is not going to be very strong, but it is going to be. And people are always, something that, people need to make consideration of is the discounting that this phenomenon is already getting. Oh, it's not going to have it. It's barely anything. It's not going to have. Okay, you don't get it. It's a second magnetic field in the solar system. Yeah, it's something, but it's really small. It's tiny in comparison to the sun. Well, who knows what happens when the sun steps down on a 400 or a 2,000-year cycle, and we have a second field building in the outer solar system. Now, what's interesting, being 2 planets away from that second field, intensifying day by day until 2024, October, and the sun stepping down. So if you know what toroid waves are, they're looping in on themselves. And then with us, the Earth, 2 planets away from the second field and 3 planets away from the major field, we're going to be right in the middle. They call this a Bosch wall. Now, I don't know if we'll be exactly in the Bosch wall in the center where it's an overlapping perfection of, it's almost a nullification of wave as it goes through its form there when it reaches that precise middle point. Now, we might be on either side of that, getting enclosed and interlooped by 2 magnetic fields. So you got to tell me, what's our atmosphere going to do? What's the crust going to do? These things are set in motion or locked in place by magnetic strength of our planet. Magnetosphere collapses, jet streams go out of flow. Cloud cells are moving everywhere. That's why when you have really high, incredible, like solar activity, there's huge, plentiful grain harvest because everything locks in place. So your ability to plant at a certain day and harvest at a certain day is locked in time, literally locked in with the sun's intensity and the magnetic field on our planet, locking everything in that makes us grow food, like the rainfall patterns. Once that gets real weak, those things go completely out of flow. Now, generally on the 11-year cycle, commodities traders trade on this cycle on what's going to happen with La Nina or El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. Like that's a known cycle. Grain guys and girls have been trading forever. Grain traders, man, they've been doing that for 200 years. Once they understood dragging a thermometer across the ocean on the sailboats back then, the water temperatures changed. And when they, the meticulous records that they found that pattern pretty early on, it was well established by, say, 1850. So I think a solid 150 years, 170 years, they've been trading grains on what happens with the Pacific water temperatures based on the solar cycles. Just expand that out. Whether it's a La Nina or an El Nino pattern doesn't really matter. It's a cycle, right? You already know El Nino, cool water, warm water, but just bring it up. 400-year grand solar minimum, high electric charge, low electric charge, high electric charge, low electric charge. And you'll start to see, doesn't matter what the cycle duration is, it's a cycle that can be mapped out with pretty good precision now. And you know their effects and consequences because it's happened many, many times before. Now pluck those arrows out of history and then you'll get a good blueprint of what's coming up the next few years.
Have you seen any like a solar flare or a solar discharge in any of these cycles that you've tracked back during the grand solar minimum? Because whenever you were talking about that, I thought, okay, well, if the sun is stepping down in a grand solar minimum, it would probably release a big discharge before it gets to its peak lowness. Does that make any sense? Have you seen throughout history any kind of, it doesn't matter how big or how small, but a solar discharge or a solar flare during this period of the grand solar minimum?
Yeah, and more. You could look at the micronova that occur every 12,000 year, or you can look at the X flare that just blasted off the sun a few days back on the Halloween X flare that arrived here. So you can go from incredible earth-ending, half of the earth-ending events, depending on what side of the sun the Earth was facing when a micronova blasted off the entire plasma shell, plus particle, plus energy, everything flying at the Earth, and that smacks and leaves glass beads across the entire moon surface and planet from that level all the way down to like the X1 that we just saw. Yeah, and you could get, I would envision, a bunch more plasma density events, CMEs, and would it be 100 small 1X flares? Because there were, let's see, about 3.5 months ago, 4 months ago, there was like an X8 that ripped off the back of the sun. Luckily, it wasn't Earth facing, because if that was, that would have ended all of our power grids. So you're starting to see, especially since 2015, like extreme X events, extreme discharges off the sun. Now, will it take an array of 100 of these between X1 and X8 events? Or will it be that, and then there's like a super discharge where we get an X100 or something, and that would be a full halo discharge. I don't care where you were in the solar system when that happened. But I would anticipate, if it were right at 2024 in October, if the sun were affected magnetically from that second magnetic field through the Earth, and it was all just one giant field at that point, interlooping on itself, whatever discharge there would be from either Jupiter and Saturn as well. Don't discount those. Those are, especially Jupiter, that's just an unignited star sitting out there. So you never know what's going to happen with the electrical phenomenon coming through these planets that are as large as unignited stars in some fashion. Because Jupiter, well known, it could be a brown dwarf. I'm not talking about Nibiru, just discount that right away. I'm just saying what Jupiter classification is. Throw a bunch of more electrical strangeness into that, and something could glow, move, discharge, reignite, whatever it would be. Because earlier, if you follow the Thunderbolts project, they go back into a lot of electric geology and different types of electric myths, if you will, to explain what's happening in the heavens with the squatter man when there's more plasma visible, with the increase in charge in it, where it's visible in the skies, and it's all, there's a lot of canyon walls and petroglyphs based on what they saw literally in the sky, so highly charged that the entire sky was full of different dancing plasma, what we would consider as petroglyphs. But they were saying that Saturn used to be a glowing body, like nearly a star up there, as recently as 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, based on the legends, the myths, the mythology, and the traditions, bringing these stories forward. So if that's the case, how would it be if we get it sort of close to this second magnetic field here in 23, 24, and Saturn starts glowing again, like not the little tiny thing that you see with your binoculars now, but literally like an eighth of the size of the sun? How would people interpret that? In the middle of the evening, you have a second body glowing like a second sun in the solar system. I think there shall be signs in the skies, because I know the plasma is going to rock back here, and we're going to see, myth and legend dancing in the skies in front of us 2024. That's going to be hard enough to control when you see plasma ropes, snakes, twists, shapes moving and morphing through the heavens here from different electrical inputs into it. Would change the color as well. So it's not all going to be pink and red. You're going to have some greens up there and blues as well. There's just how would you control that? But see, this is where it goes into, is this discharge pattern from the sun stepping down. It's going to let some small ones, but it's going to let a big one too. And how does that stand in with, going back 5,000 years or 8,000 years, 4,000 years? These huge events in history that we rarely hear about have been kind of erased from our pattern recognition of gigantic cataclysmic events based on either comets impacting the earth, the sun turning black, the earth reversing itself, all these. This is well-known myth, legend, story, tradition, all the way through almost every culture except our own modern culture, which doesn't understand the cycles of electricity and electrical input, high electrical current, low electrical current. This is the basis for the solar system itself. But you and I sitting on this planet, how stable the food growing times are and the harvest time. The plant and the harvest times are being thrown out of sync right now. But with all this electrical activity changing and the magnetism, et cetera, the human resonance field and the way we perceive reality is going to change. The hemispheres in your brain are going to change the way they process information out of this. But it's an energy change and shift. And since we're energy too, and magnetic frequency changes the way you perceive in the hemispheres of your brain, there's a lot of human change coming. And I think the governments understand that as well, that this massive amount of human observational changes here, right along with all the changes in the food, the economy, the light from the sun, the light from other planets, all these types of things. It's all morphing into one giant package. But I would fear most if I was government, people waking up and taking control of their powers that are given to them during this 10-year period to be able to manifest faster, perceive, and then see through the veil of control, and then manifest that through the mind, not any physical action, but the mind to bend the field that's in front of us. And that's where we're going with these energetic changes, if I might stay there in that sort of road of thought.
Yeah. And how would you stop people from perceiving things different? How would you stop people from getting these energetic changes like this? It's pretty obvious, right? Like, you would get them to take a experimental medical treatment, right? And to skew your perception and screw with your brain, right? That's the way that I see it. They know that these things are about to happen, and that's the way that they think that they can physically stop it. But how long do you think the second electromagnetic field is going to be affecting Earth? Is it going to be something permanent, or is it going to be something that kind of comes in and then goes away after a certain period of time?
Everybody can do this. Let's follow along. Solar System Scope is where you want to go to, solarsystemscope.com. In there, you can see where the planets are moving around, and you can go out into the future and you can go back in the past. So I think now, when I originally started using Solar System Scope to find these same geometric matchups or planetary geometry where the planets sit in their orbits, that program free used to go back to 2200 years ago, or 200 BC. No, it was 400 BC. I was able to get some information on planetary matchups, and you could start to see when they form that square, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. When they form that square, it actually looks like a square in the outer solar system. So it's pretty easy to see it. You're not going to have one over here and one over here and one over. That's more the balance. That's why it doesn't swing over into this change. But when you start to see those get your cursor and mouse and then just move the planets forward until you come to October of 2024. Then you can use your mouse to scroll in and out, like, expand the planets out or bring them in, get it to that, good size where you can see all 4 of those sitting off there. Where we'll be by ourselves, the other 2 planets behind us with the sun. So I mean, it's sun, Earth, 4 planets in a square. Now that is also going to dissipate as the planets. Jupiter will start moving away, and probably late 26, early 2027, that field will have broken apart, and it won't have any more effect on us. 2 years after that, and you can actually pretty much wire it down to the month if you go to solarsystemscope.com and try this yourself and see where all those planets are sitting. Now, if you want to use JPL models or Universal Sandbox, you can go further back in time and go to the year 1486 and the year 79 AD, and you'll see the same exact pattern that you're seeing on Solar System Scope if you want to use the easiest. That's kind of the easiest one to learn on. Play on that one first. There's different layers in there where you can see the constellations. You could put the grids in there. You can take a look where your horizon plane is with or without the ground on it. So you can do a lot of things to see where your position is in the heavens and whatnot. It's kind of like stellarium a little bit mixed in with the planets from an outer view. So anybody can do that. And you can take a look 2025 and 6. Because see, so far I'm perceiving that also these changes we're seeing right now are on a timeline. But see, this is strange because the timeline matches with my timeline, also with the solar system, the second magnetic field, and all these changes happening with supply chain and switching to a new system seems to be on that same timeline. So I'm seeing a lot of overlap here. Like somebody knows something needs to be done before a certain date, or else it can't be done after that. Is what I'm getting out of the whole Great Reset.
That makes sense. It's a manufactured kind of collapse, I personally think anyway. But do you think that the sun changing color has anything to do with the sun, the grand solar minimum and the sun cycles? Because there's no mistaking that the sun is different, right? It's than it used to be. I'm only 28 years old, but I remember the sun being yellow whenever I was a kid, and now it's bright white. It's really strange and alarming, and I don't think enough everyday people pay attention to the sun and its activity to even notice it. But it's and I think if people would just pay attention a little bit more and realize that things are changing on a fundamental level, and it's in our face, right? Like you can go and look, like, but the problem is, David, is they've flipped this and they've turned it into a heating instead of a cooling, right? And what's your thoughts on why they would flip that and turn it into something that's not, when they know that it's actually a cooling cycle and a cooling period instead of a heating period? Do you think that it might have been that they thought somewhere down the line that it was a heating, but they went too far with it and they couldn't go back on it? Or do you think that they always knew that we were hitting this grand solar minimum of low sun activity, and they're just not letting anyone know and not letting the public and the masses know to create this whole reset?
Well, the panic would start far before any of these changes. Well, they're already seeing changes affecting a lot of people's lives, but in earnest, where 5 out of 10 people or 6 out of 10 would be greatly affected by this with some sort of system that delivers something to them breaking during this natural cycle. The panic would ensue tomorrow. If this kind of type of information, like, you understand it, you're a smart guy, you can put pieces of information together, synthesize it, say, hey, this is great for me, it's not good for me. I've taken, okay, great. Now, okay, we're here. What solution could we use? That's the way I think. But you blast this across the news to just average everyday person, they're going to freak out, absolutely freak out. I think the rule of law would stop first, and then all the investment would be done. Nobody would even want to go to work tomorrow. They sure wouldn't invest in anything. because 2024 is not like investing for your retirement in 40 years. So the whole understanding of daily life would shift once people realized in 3 years, we're going to hit this second magnetic or field coming in. And there's two waves of it. The first wave is 2024, 25, 23. And the 23, it'll apex 24, and then it'll drop off 25. So you're going to get that, cycle top and bottom here. Things just wouldn't work. So if you knew it was inbound, you'd have to create an excuse for it. Again, front running. They're going to front run the excuse before the actual event happens. So somebody knew the cycle was here. Now, when I was a kid, I was taught global warming, and this is the reason that I bring it up, because back in the 1950s, 1930s specifically, they were talking about the planet warming a lot because they had the Great Dust Bowl and they were hitting like these incredible temperatures in the 1930s. Now, I'm not trying to get political. Some people with their research saying NOAA had decreased the 1930s temperatures compared to what they really were. Otherwise, we'd be seeing some extreme similar temperatures today. But by cooling the past, it makes the now appear warmer. Or you can go with what the numbers are, but we're getting really close to some extreme heat events again. So back in the 1930s, they were claiming it was warming. Same newspaper articles, the Arctic's ice is going to disappear. And then it got cold. World War II came. And then they had some really brutally cold winters in the 1950s. And then all the scientists then started to say, hey, well, we're coming into an ice age in the 1970s. And they were talking like full blown 2-mile ice, deep, thick over New York City kind of ice age, not a mini ice age, not a grand solar minimum. The whole 70s cold panic was all about an ice age. But you got to realize, how does this play into it? Because in the 1950s is when they started that whole there's coming an ice age. It got freezingly unbelievable cold. That was the Buffalo blizzard where all those people were locked in. They had to bring the army in to deliver supplies in Buffalo. I think it was 1977. It snowed for like 90 some plus straight days, and the entire city was locked in a snow event. There was a snow globe at the end of the event. And then that cool stopped in the 1980s, and then bam, global warming started, where we were the culprits for emitting whatever had been done in the 1950s and 60s for, bringing the world into a faster moving time. But they were pre-building the excuses for what you're going to see already coming in. Now, okay, so that's on the easy side of it, because they built global warming into the excuse side of things. So since I was a kid, it's been, global warming based on CO2. In the 50s and whatnot, it was all based on guys cutting the trees and plastics and stuff just coming in. Oh, chlorofluorocarbons. There's always been something going back even to the 50s. No, then it was everything from the arsenic to the asbestos, and you just tick the box on all these million things that have been thrown out there. But it's been really groundwork laid for the last 50 years or so to get people ready to see massive significant changes all around them at all times, everywhere. Now, the sun changing is something they don't want you to really discuss too much. So I'll bring it back to another way to look at what we're talking about, the color changes on the sun. It's called angstroms. Now, there's different colors of the sun and different angstrom wavelengths. It just cuts out. So, regular white light, red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet. Now, if I could strip away all the other colors and only show you the green wavelength coming off the sun, it gives you an entirely different profile magnetically and what's happening with the plasma and that sort of thing. If you go to SOHO satellites from NASA, you will see all the different angstroms and different wavelengths. And they even have the one that's just magnetometer, strict magnetic field on the sun, so you can see where the sunspots are based on the magnetic field being a little tweaked on the surface there. John Casey's book is the best indicator where the sun color is going to go. Cold Sun was his very first book, and he put a blue angstrom wavelength light on the front cover of his book. So the change from orangish to yellowish, and now we're sort of into this white. Are we tinging toward blue? Is that where the transition point is? Because like if you're going to flip colors, so let's say you're looking at a rainbow in the sky, and then it terminates into two colors, and the way the sky is going to bend and it's going to flip to a new color. Would you see a white like tinge there, or something white before it bent into the next color? Because if you're going from yellow to blue, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a transition point there. And is that rollover point the white that we're seeing in the sun now before it transitions to blue? because you got red, orange, yellow, blue. So we've seen the orange sun, we see the yellow sun. Now we're going into what? It's not going to flip back to orange because it's already gone white. So is it the transition from that? Really, it's going to go and it's going to snap into blue. See, we've never seen this before. Ancients talk about the exact same thing happening. A transluminance, and then there's a veil, and then boo, the color, the sun's a different color. But you got to go back to, if you got to study myth and legend to find these things. They're not going to come out and teach that in the school books. It's myth. It's a legend from those people living in caves that didn't know anything. Well, they only saw every plasma display that we can replicate in a plasma laboratory today, and then wrote it on the walls thousands of years before we even had the experiments to create the same shapes in the plasma chambers. Like, those are the people they're saying archaic and have no knowledge, that are just cavemen, had scribbled down every possible combination that's been seen in the last 20 years in plasma experiments already on the canyon walls. They saw it before. So, you know, they've experienced it. They know exactly what's happening. So when they talk about a white veil enveloping in the sun and then it snaps into a different color, I think it's doing that spectral color change moving over. But again, you want to believe a bunch of myth and legend, or do you want to just believe the scientist? Settled after. Science is settled, by the way. Don't ask any questions. It's settled.
Yeah, I always like the movie A Day After Tomorrow. Have you ever seen the movie A Day After Tomorrow? With
there's a little something, there's a little message in there too.
Yeah, that always resonated with me a lot. I don't really know why, but I always liked it ever since I saw it in 2008, and I just rewatched it recently, dude. And it's some really cool things, and that's what
you take away from them. So some of these things in Hollywood are showing you what's going to happen in advance, like the move 2012. That's the land subsistence stuff. So what did you take out of the movie Day After Tomorrow? I'm really curious your glimpse into it. You know, what did you see as the message that they're trying to deliver, that sort of event will happen?
Well, I've seen that's what they're basically preparing for, and they've just flipped it on its head, and they've turned it into a warming thing when it's really going to be a cooling thing, and we're going to go through a global cooling. And I don't know if it's going to be as bad as it was in that movie with because it was basically a mini ice age, and in the movie Day After Tomorrow. And I think it's to catch people off guard. Tell the people that you're going to do something one way when it's really the opposite way. You know, and that's what they've been doing that for so long, and they've put that into the movies, they put it into the TV shows. And it's just, are we smart enough? Do we have the critical thinking? Do we have the awareness and the intuition to pick apart what they're showing us and then create our own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs? Because that's the way that I work whenever I listen to someone talk, or if I watch a movie or I watch a TV show, is I take the information that's presented and then I add my own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs to it. And I feel like that's not what a lot of people do anymore, because they've erased critical thought and common sense from a lot of people's brain in that way, to where whenever they listen to someone talk or they watch a movie, they regurgitate the information instead of putting your own spin on it and thinking outside of the box with your own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. You know, that's the way that I've always worked. When I listen to someone speak, I'm able to rearrange everything that they're saying and then add my own spin with thoughts and ideas, right? I feel like that's where a lot of people are missing this, because again, it's not taught. You're not taught to do that. You're not taught healthy debate. You're not taught to think critically in school or think outside of the box. They want everyone in uniform. They want everyone in a line and looking at a very narrow point of view, a very narrow perspective of what's going on, and blanket everybody with the same thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, getting them walking around like a freaking robot that can't think for themselves and just go along with what everybody else is doing. You know, but
they're comfortable. That's why they're doing it. They're comfortable.
Yeah, it comes down to a comfortability and a fear, right? And a fear of being different, a fear of being looked at different, a fear of being laughed at, a fear of being made fun of, a fear of embarrassment, but they don't realize if they hold their ground and they stand with integrity and they do what they say that they're going to do, then it's going to, work out better for them if unless they go along with everybody else. It's the 100th, monkey effect or whatever the name of that whole thing is, monkey see, monkey do. And they've been really good at doing that, and creating our culture and shepherding people in a certain direction that they want them to go into an illusionary reality instead of making your own and creating your own timeline and creating your own reality. They want you grouped in to the think tank of the global consciousness of the planet.